Join our knowledgeable hosts as they dive into the captivating universe of comic books, movies, TV shows, and pop culture. Get ready for vibrant discussions and a shared enthusiasm for all things superhero and beyond. A comic podcast straight from the panels. This is Beyond the Capes.
All right, everyone, welcome back to another episode of Beyond the Cape podcast. With us today is Michael Kingston. You might have seen him do a whole bunch of work with. We got Headlocked Comics, and here we are to talk about the new comic coming out, Vampiro, and that is coming out with Massive and Masked Republic. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Of course. So as we like to ask every creator that we have on the show, what made you decide comics?
So I was a wrestling fan and a comic book fan for most of my life, probably since I was maybe 7 or 8 years old. And for me, nobody ever made any good wrestling comics. I liked wrestling. I would buy wrestling comics. Invariably, they would all suck. So I decided that I would just make my own. I thought it would be an easier path because in my mind, everybody that I know that likes comics likes wrestling and vice versa, whatever. So, I had read comics my whole life, but never really, I guess, understood the business of it, So I took I made a pitch and a script and a business plan and took it around to publishers, and I was summarily laughed out of the business or laughed out of the room. I mean, literally, a guy from a very large publisher laughed in my face when I said I wanted to do a wrestling comic. And everybody was very negative to it. So I just made it myself. I started out, I funded it myself. I started going to Comic-Cons and stuff. I sold it on my backpack at wrestling shows just to sort of build a little bit of an audience. And then the cool thing for me was that a lot of wrestlers that were at Comic-Cons as fans, and this was kind of before there were a lot of wrestlers signing at conventions, they would just go as fans, and then they would buy my book from me, and we, they helped support it. And then from there, I started making comics with wrestlers. So now, to this day, I've probably collaborated with maybe like 50 different wrestlers on stories and art for my various Headlock books, for my Headlock series, and then my Tales from the Road series, where I actually co-create stories with different wrestlers. And it's kind of been my niche. I built like a direct-to-consumer model and just Kickstarter, Comic-Con, wrestling shows, and I've been doing it for about 15 years with I feel like a pretty solid record of success.
Definitely. And it always surprises me. You're right about the wrestling comics. And I'm surprised you got left out because and this could be where I grew up.
This is 15 years ago though, right?
Yeah. Because I started off in WWF. That was a great time as a kid, and watching it kind of progress. And I think most people I knew loved wrestling. Everyone had an NWO shirt. It was the thing to do. So that does surprise me that they wouldn't take the wrestling comic book serious.
People get in their bubbles, right? So, and then back in, this was 2009, right? Like, there wasn't the crossover. People that were in comics, right? Like, when you're talking about publishers, basically publishers, retailers, whatever. And WWE had a bunch of unsuccessful wrestling comics. There was, stuff that would last a couple issues and then would flame out. So I think it was more of an issue of everybody was doing like licensed stuff, and I don't know. I always personally feel like you can feel as a consumer of entertainment when something is made for passion or when something is made for money. And I think if you license out, WWE comics when they're hot or whatever, maybe you don't necessarily, maybe you're not necessarily a fan, or whatever, or maybe you just can't see outside the box. Like so many people, to me, comics has been a slave to the direct market for years, and I get it, right? Like, I mean, that's where you sell to, and that's where comic book stores are sold. But like, it's almost become a snake eating its tail in a way, where like you're sort of just everybody's fighting for this audience, the same audience that goes to stores, and then it just becomes like a snake eating its tail. and the books become more geared towards those people, and then they sort of drive out, the fringes, and then it just becomes this hyper whatever. So it makes sense to me to a certain extent. But nobody had ever seen a good wrestling comic, so I had to prove it, like book by book. Probably for years. If you bought a copy of Headlocked, you bought it from me out of my hands. So, and it's fine. Like at the end of the day, like it's one of those things where I think the universe kind of gives you what you need, and you don't know it at the time. Because at the time I was upset. I'm like, what the hell? Like it's disrespectful, whatever. But it forced me to build a stronger thing, right? Like I've been making comics for 15 years now, and I don't think anybody's made wrestling comics for that long. So, I guess I never intended to be a publisher, and I kind of sort of became an accidental publisher to a certain extent. But it's been great. I've had incredible experiences, and it's I don't know if I would change it. Honestly, I've been able to do cool things. I've got lots of famous, like some famous people like my stuff. I've collaborated with celebrities and, whatever. So I've had a lot of fun making comics, probably more fun than most of my friends that work in comics.
Yes, that's correct. And it's crazy because if you go to your pages, you can immediately see all the wrestlers. And it's an impressive list of everyone that you kind of worked with and made these stories. What was the point when you were doing this where you kind of sat back and realized, like, I just want to make a wrestling comic, but this is kind of like really taking off? Was there a singular point, or like it really hit you like this is going to get big?
I had spent a long time, at conventions, at wrestling shows and whatever, just Artist Alley and whatever. And then when we did I did my first book, and then we did the second trade through Kickstarter because it had become like a thing. And we hit $27,000 on our first Kickstarter. And I was like, oh, all right. Okay. That's not bad. And then when we did volume 2 or volume 3 for Headlocked, I think we had so many trade orders. If it had been through Diamond, we would have been like number, I want to say like 17 or 18 for the month between pre-orders, and the Kickstarter books and whatever. So I was like, all right, it's not necessarily how you envisioned it, but I think, like not a lot of stuff lasts for 15 years. So.
Yeah. And here we are today, still pumping out the stories. Now,
I just finished a story with Claudio Castagnoli from AEW. Awesome. And I've got one lined up with Jordan Grace that I'm working on, and Shelton Benjamin. So, I've been really, really lucky. We did a story with Cody Rhodes. I've done a story with Ric Flair. Like just the coolest thing, I guess, to me is just guys that I grew up being a fan of, I'm now friends with. And it's cool when people you respect as creators respect you for what you've done creatively. That's like the best feeling in the world.
Yeah. Now coming into the comic book industry as a fan and kind of getting into that business model, was it difficult, or did you have a strong sense of writing already from previous things, or was it kind of developed as you kept on putting books out?
I have a biochemistry degree. I've managed truck drivers and warehouses for a good chunk of my life. I taught myself how to do it. One of the things I think is as long as you understand storytelling, I think that's the first part of it, right? And that's why collaborating with wrestlers is so easy, because they're storytellers. Exactly. They tell stories in the ring. They tell stories in their matches. They tell stories, in the car in between shows. And being around blue collar people my whole life, right? Like, there's nobody that tells more stories than your blue collar dudes. You get together on your lunch breaks or whatever, and everybody's just lying and spinning yarns and talking about bullshit and whatever. And so I feel like my ability to tell stories was always pretty good. And then I just kind of learned it as I went. I feel like I'm still probably a little more unconventional than a lot of comics now, but I try to make my stuff accessible to everybody, to where I feel like it's one thing that I feel like is very, very different from the way I make comics and the way the direct market makes comics. Yeah. If I got to read an infographic before I can read this story, like, I feel like you haven't done your job.
Exactly.
Like I used to, how many people became comic book fans because they picked them up at the drugstore and whatever, you know what I mean? Like, just completely, you're probably aware, like me, right? My first comic book was Spider-Man, was it 187? Captain America and Spider-Man fighting on the front. I was familiar with both of them as concepts from like cartoons and stuff. So then they were fighting, and I was like, oh, this is cool. I got to check it out. And I picked it up, and, even as a kid, I could understand it. But I mean, now, some of the stuff is so impenetrable. And I get it because the long-term fan base wants it to be that, but I think it makes it harder for people to dive in.
Oh yeah. I was just talking to someone today, and I love DC Comics. That will always, to the day I die, that will be my favorite main publisher. And I love the new, I think it's Absolute that we've been reading, but it's a 7-part Absolute with like 12 different tie-ins for each individual person out of their own storyline. I said, I'm not buying 30 issues for single stories for like 2 panels that relate to a story. That's hard for anyone to do.
Sure.
It's intimidating when you go to look at the rack and, you could buy these 2 comics, wait 1 month, get this one comic, and then maybe if you get these 3, you'll understand what's going on.
I mean, I haven't consumed superhero comics for a long time just because of it's impossible to stay when they hit those big crossovers, and then, like, it's more than I want. Like, I'll read like if you have like a standalone hero, and like a Tom King Vision story or whatever, you know what I mean, is a perfect example of that. Like, I'll read that, or Matt Fraction's Hawkeye or whatever. Like, I'll read that kind of stuff. But I mean, like, I loved X-Men. X-Men is what got me into comics, but I haven't read X-Men in years, because to me it's when I look at it, it's not recognizable to me. And I get it, things have to evolve and you have to build new fan bases and stuff. But I also think it's hard when you pick something up and you're just like, because it's not easy to read comics, right? Like, there's the 3-month story to store nonsense that they still do in this day and age, and there's so many things. It's expensive. I mean, they go quick if you're not a real art appreciator or whatever. Like, it's not easy to make. It's not easy for people to get into it. So I think you gotta kind of come to them a little bit if you want your stuff to be read. One of the things that I'm most proud of is, from selling my books at wrestling shows and stuff, I was a ton of people's first comic book. And I think that's something, like I said, that I'm very proud of, even though I don't technically exist in comics in a lot of ways. Having people, like, I picked up my first comic book because it was Spider-Man and Captain America, right? Like, not a lot of people pick up a book because of a creator that's on it, but there's a lot of people who picked up my books because of me. And I think that's because I don't do branded stuff, right? I don't do, everything I do exists in a sort of fictional universe, and we use sort of analog characters and stuff and whatever to avoid trademark nonsense. But, like, I the point of pride with me for sure.
Definitely. Now, 15 years ago when you started this, and you said that's like what, 2009 when you had started. Wrestling had a huge history by the time you were getting ready to start this. How did you choose to go about writing this first book, just with the amount of wrestlers and storylines available? You had already a solid chunk of what was available to you.
So my first series that I opened with is just Headlocked. And it's a story about a theater major who drops out of college. He sort of unexpectedly falls in love with wrestling, sees like the art form behind it. He sort of approaches it with this sort of stereotypical sort of, it's fake nonsense or whatever. And then he gets taken to a show kind of against his will, and then he falls in love with it, and he decides to drop out of college and decides this is what he wants his art to be. And so it's sort of, the girl gets off the bus in Hollywood kind of story. He's sort of coming of age in this place with no rules. Everything that he was, he sort of jettisoned to become this new thing. And now he kind of has to figure out his identity while he's sort of in the Wild West, right? Like, and then we're examining the craft of wrestling through the eyes of a performance artist. So, I've always found it fascinating. And wrestling's always very polarizing, where people either kind of love it or they hate it. And so I always thought it would be interesting to see what would happen if people who didn't love wrestling looked at it through my eyes, instead of, just looking at it as like, oh, they're oiled up hairless men pretending to hit each other. And, but if you looked at it as an art form or whatever.
Yeah.
And so that's why I chose Mike Hartman as his character, and he's sort of a blank slate. And I've had a bunch of people who've bought the book over the years that weren't into wrestling, that were very, impressed with the sort of take on it, and they didn't understand what it was and whatnot. So, so to me, that was the best way to start. Like, tell an entertaining story. It's more like a cable drama than anything else. And you sort of hide some medicine in the food and see if you can educate some people at the same time.
Yeah, I was wondering that when I was looking kind of at your work. Have you ever had someone come up to you and say, I knew nothing about wrestling, or I didn't want to know anything about wrestling, but seeing your passion, I at least decided to give it a try, and now I'm into wrestling?
I've definitely had that happen. I've also had the inverse happen, where I've had a ton of wrestling fans who've never bought comics and now are super, super into comics. Some of them don't even watch wrestling anymore, but still read comics. So I'm kind of a gateway drug on both sides of it. So it's it's been cool. I always laugh about this, but the first autograph I ever signed, the first book I ever signed, was for a 58-year-old black woman. And I was like, wow, you're the opposite. I imagined this moment many times, and you are demographically as opposite as I ever could have imagined. But she was great. She loved the book, and she read it that day, and then she came back the next day to tell me how much she liked it. I don't know. Yeah, it's been cool. I just try to make it entertaining for everybody. Like, there's a lot of inside baseball stuff for wrestling fans, but it doesn't you don't necessarily have to understand it to understand the story. It doesn't, like, it's kind of, if you know kind of stuff, but you can still kind of follow the story as just a, kid chasing his dream in a very dangerous place.
Definitely. And then one last question before we get into the whole reason we're here. Is you've had a lot of success, obviously, in these 15 years. You've done incredible team ups with wrestlers. Where would you like to see kind of what you're doing go to? Like, what would be the next step for you? Like, like a compilation, like would you do a wrestling history book that's all comic like focused, but like the history of comics, or history of wrestling in comics?
Well, I'm actually doing a comic book biography, and I can't necessarily,
Awesome.
I can't tell you who it is right now, but it's licensed through their estate. It's somebody that's not, currently with us, but it's a big project. And Daniel Warren Johnson did the cover for it. It's going to be, we'll be announcing that later this year. It's going to be a big deal.
Awesome. Well, I definitely can't wait for that. So the whole reason we're here, is to bring us the combo of Massive and Masked Republic coming out to put out Vampiro. Now, it's Rockabilly Apocalypse, correct?
Yes.
All right. I was very excited when I got the email because I didn't know who Vampiro was until I luckily had the El Rey network, and I said, they gave Robert Rodriguez his own channel. I said, all right, let me just put on Lucha Underground. Let me just see what this is, because I love wrestling, but I was getting a little bit tired of it. I said, all right, this is pretty good. Who is this guy hosting Vampiro? And I said, I got to look this guy up. And then when I looked up him, his feud and drama with Kanan, and I'm like, oh my God, he's on the show too with Prince Puma. And then I just got sucked into the vortex. How did this all come about with him?
So it's a weird story. So Vampiro is very popular in Mexico, and at one point, I believe he's hosting a punk and rockabilly radio show, and they were making a Rockabilly Vampiro action figure, but that character hadn't existed in space. So I've worked with Masked Republic forever. We split a space at San Diego Comic-Con every year, and I've known Kevin for a long time. I have tons of respect for him, Kevin Kleinrock. And we had always been kind of looking for a project to work together on. So he's like, hey, do you want to do a tie-in for this action figure? And I was like, sure. And it just gave me a chance to sort of, I don't know, do something different and kind of let loose. And so I wrote it as weird as I possibly could, and thinking that, whatever, that would just be it. It would just be this one thing. And then there are some people who stumbled across it, who liked it, and wanted to see that story get told more, which was, now I had to finish it, which was tricky because I made it super weird. But I sort of envisioned this idea of Vampiro as a underground guitarist who sort of existed throughout time, and it's kind of one of those if you know kind of things. Like, he just shows up and plays, and like super like, super guitar heads know who he is, but he's never been on a concert poster or whatever. And then at night after his shows, his guitar converts into a literal axe, and he hunts monsters of both the human and supernatural variety. And I just tried to have as much fun with it as possible. So one of my favorite comics, one of the things, this is a little digression here. So I feel like everybody sort of, when you've been a fan of something for a long time, you sort of have this progression, right? Like, the popular thing is what hooks you, right? Like, Hulk Hogan made a ton of people wrestling fans. You know what I mean? Superman, Spider-Man, whatever. Like, that's what brings you to the dance. And then when you're in it long enough, you sort of tire of the tropes. And then there's things that sort of expand your understanding of the medium. And then you're sort of in it for life, right? So for me, it was Ring of Honor in wrestling, discovering Samoa Joe and CM Punk, El Generico, Kevin Steen, whatever, blew my mind in 2005. And that's part of why I wanted to write Headlocked. But for comics, for me, I was a lifelong X-Men fan, and I read Preacher, and Preacher blew my mind.
Yeah.
And so I described this Vampiro series as Preacher meets Cannonball Run. And it's and I just wanted to just do something fun like that, something weird and fun, because Vampiro is such a, I mean it in the best possible way, but he's such a weird dude, right? Like, he was part of the Misfits. He's a wrestler. Like, he's got so much personal charisma. Sid Vicious just died yesterday, and he was a guy like that just had this sort of personal charisma that it's just something you can't ever teach, right? And Vampiro is like that. He's so just charismatic. We had him at our San Diego Comic-Con booth this year to do the ash can for the book, and the dude showed up in like a zoot suit looking like a mafia hitman from Italy or something. I mean, just an amazing dude. And he's just got all these, weird ideas and stuff and whatever, and he's just such an interesting guy. So I mean, it was cool to, I wanted to do who he was justice, but I also think, right, like, if you're going to do something, like, especially in comics, right, like, why not make it weird? I mean, so, I mean, I just thought about, like, the funnest, weirdest concepts I could, and then sort of put them all in different vehicles and put them on Route 66, and like, oh, let's see what happens. And it's super fun. It's probably one of the funnest things I've ever written. And I love writing it. I just try to just cut loose and make some weird stuff. And the cool thing is right after we're done with this story, the character is immortal, right? So we can tell his tales. We can just do a different time period, right? We can jump to, if we want to do something in the 1800s, if we want to do something in the 2100s. I mean, we could do whatever we want, wherever we want, with him as a character. So, I mean, it's been so much fun to work on, and I really hope people pick it up, because I don't know, like, it's, I mean, it's meant to be, there's whatever, a little thought-provoking stuff in it, but I mean, it's really just a super fun popcorn flick. Like, if you like Dusk Till Dawn, like that type of stuff, I think you'll eat this up with a spoon.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think when you look at his career and what he's accomplished, I mean, even in the ring, watching some of his old footage from when he was wrestling in Mexico, like I said, to hosting Lucha Underground, he's just I think even the one time like he got in the ring, I was like, oh man, this guy's getting in the ring. What can he not do? He's hosting, he's fighting. He just brings out kind of the best of wrestling. Now he's got a lot. Yeah, he's got a lot of stories. I gotta imagine to be told. So did he put any of his stories into or give you like, hey, this is crazy? Because I know the one I was always wondering if it was going to get put in was when he got exorcism to get the demons away from him.
So this story was very much is mostly conceived by me with his sort of trying to be honor the character, who he is as a person and how he talks, and then but like just to make something fun and weird and just capture the sort of essence of Vampiro. And since then, I mean, we've had a lot of talks about stuff, and he's got some ideas, that have already kind of got me sort of salivating to do, the next arc after this. This first arc is going to be 10 issues. I think it's a double-sized first issue, double-sized last issue. So it's technically 12 issues of story. It's I think I'm definitely excited for where we might go after this. I just I've always been fascinated by books. I think Planetary and just stuff like that that's sort of weird, and you explore different corners of the world and types of stuff. And I don't know, like I think sometimes you can know too much about stuff, right? Like science figures out the answers for everything, which is good too, because people obviously get a little crazy when they don't have answers and they make weird concepts. But I also think that there's a sort of a romantic element to having some sort of mystery in the world. So I do think that that's kind of what I want to do with the series if we're able to do more beyond this series. It's fun. I can't wait for people to see it. We've got I think the covers just dropped for issue 2. So the antagonist in issue 2 is a motorcycle gang of shotgun-toting nuns called the Bad Habit that are hunting Vampiro. And that's a lot of fun. It's a sort of, because we get heavy into the motorcycle culture and sort of mix it with like, some heavy religious stuff. And it's fun. And then the coolest thing is just the covers. With Raphael Galore, who used to paint Lucha fantasy covers for the Lucha Mags, and Pegaso, and they were sort of the two masters. And so we've got Galore doing 1 and 2, and then Pegaso's doing 3 and 4, and then Galore's back on issue 5. I think Galore did the cover for what will be the first trade. And their stuff is amazing. I mean, the covers alone are just gonna blow people's minds away.
Definitely. Now with this project, was there any difficult part of it just because someone said, hey, here's this bigger than life character. I mean, he's a great guy. Hey, here's a fun action figure, make a story, go wild. I mean, obviously that makes it easy because sky's the limit. But at the same time, too, it's like, hey, whatever you want, you can make it up. You don't have like a set of parameters to kind of make the story. Did that make it any more difficult?
I mean, I've been making comics for 15 years and they've all been wrestling, right? Like even the Tales from the Road stuff, we do different, like we'll play with different genres, but they're all always come back to wrestling. And there's no wrestling in this. I mean, there's probably a move or two here and there or whatever, but like, so, and obviously I've read comics my whole life. So I've had like sort of 15 years I've been reading comics since I was 8. So, I mean, I've got 23 long boxes in my basement. So, I've had this, you spend years thinking about ideas and stuff or whatever, and I've never really had the opportunity to sort of cut loose in a non-wrestling capacity. So no, it was super easy because it's been one of the easiest things to write. I mean, partly because it's so much fun, and I just think because I'm just locked into Vampiro and who he is, and I've just had whatever, like 15 years of making comics and thinking about all the things I would do, just never having a place to put them. And then now I can kind of go wild.
Awesome. Now, was it kind of a different character to write for? Because, I mean, like I said, obviously Vampiro, his brief stint here, like he's done wrestling. I want to say he's done some exhibition stuff up here, but Mexico wrestling, that's like his homestead. That's where everyone knows his name. Was that kind of like a different when you were incorporating characteristics of that into the character that made it different than, say, writing for Ric Flair?
He's just Vamp's just a very unique person. Yeah. I mean, everybody obviously is unique in their own ways, but Vamp is like a special kind of unique. And I don't mean that. I mean that just in the best possible way. Like, cool. I mean, one of the things I love about making comics making comics is difficult and there's a ton of travel and fighting and whatever, but like, it's never boring, right? Like, I just never want my life to be boring. And Vampiro, like, there's no such thing as a boring discussion with him. He is an interesting dude. So, it's always tricky when you're, I guess, like when I was doing Tales from the Road and like, if I'm doing a story with Trish Stratus and we're making a character based on Trish Stratus, but it's not Trish Stratus, but it's like an analog, right? But it doesn't have to be perfect because you can always be like, hey, it's not you, it's this person, right? And you can sort of adapt that person's characteristics to fit the story if you need to. But in this, it's Vampiro. And so this is the first time I've done something like this. So it is tricky to sort of put words in people's mouths and stuff and whatever, but he loves it. And so that's that's it, right? Like, obviously for me, like, obviously I want people to love it, but I want to make sure that I'm, that he's happy with it too.
For sure. As you're talking, obviously you guys were saying he told you stories that just would be great for like another arc. Would you also be interested, like if someone's like, hey, I would love to do Vampiro meets, say, another famous wrestler or kind of bigger than life character, and let's do like a crossover episode. Would you be interested in doing that, or is this something you would see like he kind of needs like his own story by himself for a little bit before I would ever want to do something like that?
Oh, I think there are so many characters. I mean, like like just right off the top of my head, right? Like Vampirella.
Yes, for sure.
You know what I mean? Like, I'm just being a vampire who's existed forever, right? Like, you could put him anywhere, but like, I feel like just more pulpy characters, I think he would fit well with. I think that there's endless grounds for team up, right? So if the book does good, yeah, I mean, if I could do a Vampiro team up series and we could just put them with different heroes or something, I mean, that would be unbelievable.
Yeah. With this experience, would you ever think of taking some of like the AEW or WWE stars and doing like a similar story with, say, like Undertaker Kane? Obviously, that was a big storyline back in the day, but instead of doing like a wrestling where they're wrestlers, doing like an actual like supernatural like exorcist or something that they're fighting evil. Would you ever have interest in doing that after this project?
I mean, so I think I mentioned this before, but I'm I have a biochemistry degree and I'm sort of a research oriented person. And like, so like, I love, like, a lot of people I think don't like licensed work. I don't mind it at all because I think it's fun. Like, I think there's obviously a real lazy way that you can do licensed work.
For sure.
But I think for me, the trick is to come up with something captivating while sort of adhering to, you have all these sort of guideposts that you can't get through. And they come up with something captivating. I wrote a couple stories for the WWE comic for Boom. I co-wrote a story with AJ Styles and I co-wrote a story with Samoa Joe. I wrote a Bret Hart story. And, we did, I think in 3 stories, I got 1 note, right? And I know some of my other friends that wrote stories didn't have that same experience, but like, I just think I don't know. Yeah. I love the challenge, right? Like, give me a challenge, give me, you know what I mean? Like, give me Undertaker and Kane as, whatever, time traveling detectives or whatever. I'll make it work. You know what I mean? But I think it's hard, right? I think it would be hard to do and not have it feel schlocky, but if you
Yeah.
could do it in the right way, then I think, you know, and that's the trick, right? That's on the writer, the creator, whatever, to sort of hit the right tone and make it sort of fun and not be cheesy.
For sure. And looking at the stills of this issue, from what I did see, you guys got really vibrant colors, and kind of with the art was, I think it's really eye popping, kind of eye catching. Now, obviously, I'm assuming because the action figure is already out, where was like the Vampiro character design kind of already dictated, or they said if you wrote like he had this color hair, even though like the action figure didn't, like it's okay, like you can. Did you have kind of freedom in that sense, or?
Yeah, no, I think the action figure literally just came out. Like, I mean, they obviously didn't put the comic in it or whatever.
Yeah.
I think it just came out like a month ago or whatever. So like we actually had sort of free reign to sort of, you know, play with the design elements a little bit. You know, and yeah, the art's awesome. Napalm is tremendous.
Yeah.
And he's definitely captured, I think, the spirit of what we're trying to do. Also, he is banging out incredible variant covers for these. I mean, the main covers are gorgeous, but he did like a Lucha movie poster variant cover for the first issue, and he did kind of his best Drew Struzan impression for volume 2, and they are gorgeous. That's the one thing I will say is, I mean, I feel like all of our covers have been just fantastic. And it helps too, right? Like for me, it's a little nerve wracking because I haven't had a book in comic stores in a long time. So, you know, then it's just stuff I never had to consider, right? Because I have a fan base that'll buy my stuff through Kickstarter and it shows and whatever. And like I've developed that over the years. Now you sort of have to recondition them to go to stores or pre-order it through whatever. And it's just not it's not something that people are used to. And then I'm thinking about, you just don't think about, there's certain things you don't think about that you have to think about now. And it's been interesting. It's been an interesting challenge. But yeah, I think our covers are, I don't know. I mean, I feel like we could probably put Galore Progresso in for some sort of award nomination at the end of next year.
For sure. Now, did you have any like ideas of your own for like a cover? Because when I see a story like this, and looking at that main cover, where there's just like there's monsters everywhere, I always wonder like, is there gonna be like a connecting cover or like a connecting ring cover, like it's a whole ring when you have like all the issues? Or did you have any like you're like, oh, you know, if we do a variant, I'd really like to pay homage to this and do this variant, or just like suggestions?
Oh, I throw suggestions out all the time. But I mean, if there's one thing that I have learned as a writer in comics, I mean, the best thing you can do is, if it doesn't impact the story, just keep your mouth shut. I think it's hard. I do panels about breaking into comics with people, and I always try to tell young writers, right? Like, you're enthusiastic about your thing and you want it a certain way, but like artists just see things differently than you do.
Correct.
So, when I write a script, I have an idea in my head of what it's going to look like. And then, it always comes back better when, no matter who the artist is, whenever I see it, I'm like, oh yeah, that's excellent, right? Like, or that's better than I would have done, or that's better than my idea, or they've executed this beyond my expectations. So I try to give, I try to give people some direction sometimes, but I also tell people, right, like, if you feel a type of way about something, so for our Headlock books, Jerry the King Lawler paints the covers, and he's an artist, and he's a big Norman Rockwell fan. So we do Norman Rockwell covers because he's excited to paint about him, right? Like, wrestling is his job. So like, you know what I mean? Like, and that's a hard thing for people to understand sometimes, because you're a fan of something and it's somebody else's job. So I always try to give people stuff to be excited to work on. Like when we do Tales from the Road collaborations, I think about, what these guys like, right? So I did a video game based story with Adam Cole. He's a big video game guy, and then I try to ask my artists, like, what do you like to draw? What don't you like to draw? Is there, and then if I can, I try to incorporate that stuff into the story just to make it, you can always tell, like I said, you can always tell when things are made
Definitely.
for passion or excitement or whatever. So the more excited you can get your artist about what they're doing, the better the product is going to be at the end of the day.
Yeah, no, you're not the first person to say that, and I sometimes feel like it still needs to be said a lot more. And that's asking your artists what they want to draw. Because if they come back to you like, hey, I'm not really good at like this or doing black and gray, you're like, oh well, I want the story to be in black and gray. They're not going to really want to draw it. I mean, they're going to give you basic work, but if you're like, hey, paint in your style, I just kind of want you to be like, use these colors or make this pop. But otherwise, do what you want to do, but just kind of take my story and make it fun in yours, but ours together. You're going to get a better product for sure.
Like for years, right? If I can make a wrestling analogy here, Ric Flair always chopped people and didn't throw a lot of punches because he felt like he threw bad punches. So he threw chops instead, right? Like you always got to sort of play to your strengths and
for sure
do what you do well. I mean, there's definitely something to be said for pushing outside of your comfort zone, but also you don't want to be so far out of your comfort zone that, everything has sort of bad energy.
Yeah. I mean, you want to be able to see your work in it, but also that it's a collaboration and you experimented a little bit, maybe pushed your skills. And I mean, this is the collaboration. And this is what we obviously got, Vampiro, Rockabilly, Apocalypse coming out soon. So what's our dates on this?
The final order cutoff date is September 15th. And then I think the book comes out October 16th, which is New York Comic Con week. But yeah, it's I don't know. It's like I said, I definitely hope people give it a shot. The first issue is double sized. It's 48 pages. There's a ton of action in it. I think it's fun, funny, whatever. So I hope people give it a shot, and if they like it, I hope they come back for more. This is definitely something that I could see myself writing for a long time, and never getting tired of it. So I don't know. Yeah, check it out. See what you think.
And with this team up of Massive and Masked Republic, so this will go to pretty much everyone's local LCS. I know at my LCS we get Massive, so definitely request it if you're interested in getting the book, because I'm assuming most LCS should be able to get the code.
Yeah, and you can pre-order it off the internet. I've had friends do that too that don't have comic book stores in their area anymore. It's crazy how some people just live, you take it for granted. You grow up and you're like, oh, I've got all these comic book stores around me, and some people are 50, 100 miles from one. So if you're not near one or whatever, or if you don't feel like going to pre-order or whatever, just you can go to the Massive website and have it shipped to you. But I do think it's gonna. I don't know. I feel like it's gonna do well. I feel like I've got my fingers crossed, but we definitely could use everybody's help.
For sure. And I can assure everyone listening. Again, I've seen the first few pages of it. It looks fantastic. If you're a fan of wrestling, this is, and if you're not familiar with Vampiro, you're in for a treat, because who he is in the comic books, as it sounds like. You captured who he is outside of the comic books as well. So everyone listening, go and pick it up. For everyone interested in keeping up with you and seeing what you're up to in your latest project, where's the best place to follow you?
All of my socials are Headlockedcomic. It's one word. It's our website. We're our web stores if you want to check out our books. Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, whatever, all the stuff. And it's all me. So, if you got questions or if there's anything I can help anybody with in terms of finding a way to order it or getting it in their hands or whatever, by all means, hit me up. I'm always around.
All right, perfect. Well, thank you for coming on. Thank you for answering our questions. Everyone, be on the lookout for this book. As soon as we end the show, I'll have all the links to the website, so you can go ahead and get this. Go to your LCS, get this book on the shelves, and enjoy. Again, Michael, thank you for coming on the show, and we look forward to watching your work come out. Everyone listening, hope you enjoyed. Follow Michael, follow us, and have a good night.